Welcome to the Fucking Mentality Podcast, where we speak with business owners and we ask them what their fucking moment was that makes them say, fuck it, let's do it. Either we swim or we drown. What's your moment? Share with us. We've got Danny Mikati here today. I don't know how to best introduce you, Danny, because you're a man with many hats. Do you want to tell me how to best describe you?
Oh, that's a very good one. Thanks, Dave. I suppose at the moment, the greatest way to describe me is I have my professional space and I have my charity space.
Yeah.
So in the charity world, I'm a director and the CEO of AusRelief, a humanitarian aid agency. Mm-hmm. I've been with them for 9 years. AusRelief turns 10 this year.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And basically, I get the honour of looking after an amazing team in Australia and all around the world. But we're trying to see what we can do to tackle poverty and people in pretty bad situations. On the professional side, my business partner and I look after a number of companies. Our flagship, I suppose, is Precision Integrity Services, which is primarily an investigations firm. We're all former police officers, so it's a team of former detectives from New South Wales Police. Yeah. And we do, we get into all kinds of adventures. Yeah. And in everything from working with the corporate space to the legal fraternity, so mainly barristers, lawyers, that kind of stuff. But also then the private sector, depending on what people's needs are. Yeah. We also do a fair bit in the security space in terms of bodyguarding and sort of more niche, high net worth people that we look after around the world in that space. Also risk assessments. We do a lot of security consulting, for our company Strongs. And then we have WHS Policy and Procedures Australia, where we look after WHS from A to Z, from policy to audits to investigations. Yeah. That's probably me in a nutshell.
And you're also a father as well?
Yes, my main job is, father and husband, father of 3 kids. Yeah.
How do you manage all of that?
I don't. I do my best. Like I said, having a business partner really helps. I mean, Anthony, that also burdens a lot for me at work because being my business partner and closest friend. That really helps in terms of that, but we do have a number of entities, so we are quite stretched out. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I have excellent team in AusRelief and an excellent team in my business. So, the crew knows what to do, and they kind of manage themselves to an extent.
And I know that you're involved in international business ventures as well.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I've got one business venture here in Australia. Yeah. And I'm a father of 1 child. Yeah. And that sends me nuts already.
Yeah, don't worry. That's why I'm just more nuts than you. That's all it is.
So tell me more about AusRelief. What does AusRelief focus on, or how does AusRelief, differ from other charities? I know a little bit, but just for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose AusRelief its focus is domestically, so here in Australia, where we really look at people that have sort of needs in terms of mainly being under the poverty line, so they may have difficult access because of their citizenship or they're refugees or they're homeless and for various reasons don't get the normal social assistance that you'd get as a resident of Australia. So we do help with that. We have a nice collaboration with Coles and Woolies, where we have our grocery boxes, or in probably about, I think, 22 stores around Sydney, where people donate their groceries, and we use those groceries to give directly to people who are struggling, local Aussies that are struggling. Mainly we assist schools, so some of the public schools have pantries that we've helped stock with these groceries, so it's kind of anonymous and there's no stigma attached. The bags aren't labelled, so the students that need these sort of assistance, they just take a bag of shopping and go, like no one knows what it's for. Very proud of that sort of system. We helped out a lot during COVID, especially the elderly that were struggling to get supplies. So we took on some significant sort of workload there in helping people to get their basic needs, especially for those that were in the elderly or vulnerable persons sort of sector. Internationally, we do most of our work is crisis response because of the conflict zones around the world. So we're in those main centres. In other areas of the world, like Cambodia, my Southeast Asian head office is in Cambodia. I have an amazing team there, where not only do they look after people that are in need, but also there's sustainable programs. So we have social enterprises that run there. We've built what we call like a CDC, or Community Development Centre, which is the closest thing I can compare it to is a TAFE.
Yeah.
So basically people go into this facility and learn a trade or learn some kind of business, so then they can then look after their own communities in that space. So I love that program as well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sort of agriculture work there where we do help them with farming, give farmers the ability to improve the way they're doing things by having the access to technology that they didn't have before. Yeah. A lot of grants and little microfinancing situations. I do the same in Africa as well. Yeah. So we're very lucky. We have some amazing work that we get to do overseas. But at the moment, because of the horrific circumstances in terms of conflict zones around the world, a lot of it has been basic humanitarian response: food, clothing, shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen the complete opposite of the both worlds. I come from Indonesia, from a small town in Borneo, and I came here when I was 18. Well, basically growing up in Borneo, you don't really see the reality of the world when you see as an adult, right? And I think we're pretty privileged that we live in Sydney, in Australia, in a beautiful city. And you don't get to see the struggles, the real struggles at the street level. So the last time I went back to Indonesia, in the capital city of Jakarta,
yes,
I was in the area that was not very privileged, so to speak. And that really opened up my eyes. That was really, wow, this is humans. We just take things for granted.
Yeah, definitely. My last trip to Indonesia was Lombok, where we did a cataract program, where we got the ability to restore sight to over 890 people, ranging from 12 years of age all the way up to like 89 years of age. It was a beautiful experience. Really enjoyed my time. It's my favorite mission so far.
Yeah, that was amazing. And what triggered you to get involved with AusRelief or with a charity?
That's a good question. I've always been in the community sector. So even before I joined the police, I was doing a bit of youth work while I was at uni. Yeah. So I was involved in doing a specific tutoring program for what they called youth at risk at the time. And I had a little cohort of young men that were year 9 age, year 9 and year 10. And these boys were all the siblings of or sons of people that were incarcerated for extended periods of time. Yeah. And seen that already outside the public school system because they'd been expelled or suspended multiple times. And so I was one of the tutors that was got to help them with their it's academics, but also a bit of a mentoring program.
What was the experience like?
That was amazing. And it's something that sometimes I forget as a chapter of my life, but that came full circle because one of those boys ended up becoming quite a well-known criminal solicitor. And my first meeting with him after we'd done the program, I didn't see him for years. I was actually looking after the dock or the jail of the police station at the time. That was one of my first shifts as in charge of the jail of the police station, and there was a raid happening, and one of the persons detained was his client. So he came in to advocate for his client and saw me. We're like having a reunion. It was just amazing. So that was pretty serendipitous at the time. But yeah, I mean, so the community stuff for me was always there in my early sort of part of my life through uni and so on. So I focused on looking after community issues, mainly with youth and addictions, that kind of stuff. That's sort of my space. And then from there, you start to meet other like-minded people. But I was never put in my mind that I would get involved in international charity work because my strength was what I knew about the local area, especially Southwest Sydney. That was kind of my focus. But yeah, I ended up seeing a post on social media that my co-directors had put, who are the founders of AusRelief, had put about rehabilitation, and I assumed it was about drug and alcohol rehabilitation. Yeah. So I got quite angry because I'm like, finally we're doing something, and now here's comes someone else to do the same thing. Where were you before? Like, I was kind of frustrated.
Yeah.
So I knew them because we went to uni together. We were doing different courses. So then they're a bit older than me. I'll reinforce that because I like saying that. There's very few people. So I called them and they said, "What are you talking about? It ended up being medical rehabilitation." They go, "But tell us about this addiction stuff you're doing." They go, "Come in and see us." So I went in and I explained what I was doing currently. I was with a small group of us were working very strongly on dealing with people with Southwest Sydney that had addiction issues, especially young people. And trying to develop more culturally appropriate pathways because people weren't using it.
Yeah.
And they said, "Hey, come do it here under our banner. Like, we'll give you all the support, the resources that you need." And I was like, that was amazing, you know. So that was my foot in the door. Probably about 6 months later, they asked me to join the board of directors and become one of the directors.
Yeah.
And the story goes on from there.
Yeah. And with doing this, with doing charity internationally, I would imagine you would have a mindset shift along the way as well.
Sorry, a mindset shift, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Once, like, I didn't travel in the first, like, probably the first year or two with AusRelief. I stayed looking after my local sort of portfolio. My first trip was to Cambodia.
Yeah.
So I got to go there and we were delivering food packs, rice for different villages that were really impoverished. I think we looked after probably about 1,000 families from memory. It was really short. Like, it was, I think I did it. I remember flying out of Sydney Thursday night and coming back to Sydney Tuesday.
Yeah.
So in that short amount of time, including travel time, we looked after about 1,000 families. It was pretty full on.
Yeah.
And we were just giving food and rice. And I was a small team. It was my first field mission that I was leading. And there was probably, I think, 4 of us from Australia. And the 3 that came with me, they were donors. And were given the chance to actually see the beneficiary and where their donations are going, and to help distribute it. So it was like a really cool excursion in terms of actually, for you to see, here's your own due diligence. This is what we do. We're actually giving it to these people, and they were also like experienced professionals, and they had things to contribute as well. So I remember walking down towards one of the waterside villages. They're usually the poorest communities. Yeah. As you know, the waterway is extremely polluted. Correct. Sort of down there. So fishing isn't the greatest, yet that's what they do, right? That's what they're trying to live off.
That's where I grew up.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so we're sort of, I remember carrying rice bags over my shoulder as we're walking down towards this waterway, and kids just ran to us and they were celebrating. It was like we brought presents, and it was just rice, like, you know, and it was just like, I was like, wow, I can't imagine going home to my kids and going, "Hey, I brought you rice." Like, they'd be like, "Well, Dad, what the hell?" You know? So it sort of was one of those kind of surreal moments where I went, you know, it's amazing what we take for granted in that space. But that was the start. Definitely wasn't the finish, because after that, the other countries I went to were more harrowing, because it was people that were fleeing conflict, fleeing death, fleeing, military might, significant disease, earthquakes, floods. So it was very different to what the situation in Cambodia. Yeah. It was more in your face, and people were direct trauma, where Cambodia was generational kind of trauma based on the regimes that had happened and things in the past, and then trying to bounce back. I find there are parts in the world like Cambodia where, even though by our standards they're living below a poverty line, they're very grateful people, and they sort of, it's not like seeing how good someone else is doing right in front of your face. Yeah. You know, so they're not starving, so to speak. They're definitely not doing great. Yeah. But there's fruit on the trees, there's something to eat. Where in the other situations, I've got people that used to be high court judges, now in a refugee camp in Yemen, you know, from Yemen in Djibouti, for example, still wearing their suit and tie in significant heat. Yeah. Because they left with just the clothes on their back. Yeah. And now they're lining up for hours for water, which isn't the cleanest water. Like, it's just, you know, you're working under UN makeshift tents, and stuff. So big difference in in who your beneficiary is, and they find it very difficult to reconcile because they've got a frame of reference where they were sort of up here in terms of their status and what they were doing. And I met a lot of doctors, judges, professionals, professors, and who were really struggling with this.
Yeah.
So there's a dichotomy there.
Yeah. When you get to a certain level of comfort, where the world is just a whole big, cushions around you, when you're faced with difficulties like that, everything changes.
Yeah.
And you said some of the guys that went with you were donors. For a lot of, successful business owners that are in Australia that are looking for something more that they want to give back as well. How do they get involved or become donors or even, be on the ground doing something real just to,
Yeah.
Because a lot of people want to do these to be able to feel good about themselves, and some people really want to give back to the community as well.
Yeah. Look, I think one thing to definitely speak about is this humanitarian tourism, so to speak, can be quite insensitive to the community that you're looking after.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line, and it really depends. We're very careful about with which community we take donors to, because I don't want the beneficiary or the community to feel like they're on show, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't want them exploited. So usually with the villagers or the people that we deal with, they're aware of the situation, they're quite welcoming of it, and they like to show their culture and what they do, and sort of so that there's a bit of a mutual learning in the process, especially in the CDC. I would not, for example, take people with me to zones where, as I said, people are in refugee sort of areas and there's a lot of trauma there.
Yeah.
And, you start to feel like you're an exhibit in a zoo, if that makes sense. And I don't want any human ever to feel that. So we're very careful. But for people that wanted to give back and put impact, definitely just to reach out to us. And go on the website, make an inquiry, reach out to us, come in, have a meeting. We can come up with all kinds of things. What I've done with many businesses is link them to a project. So for example, I had one of the first companies that did it was an IT company. They're called IC Technology, and what their owner said to me was, I want eventually each one of my staff to be sponsoring an orphan, right? And so I said to him, as noble as that sounds, what would work better is if your group sponsors an orphanage.
Yeah.
And I said, because sponsoring an orphan is, back in the day when you're growing up and you're watching, I'm a lot older than you, David, so back in the day when you're growing up and watching the 40-hour famine or World Vision and watching these orphans sponsor an orphan today, and you think they become like your pen pals where you write letters to them and they write letters to you.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, that's just not the case. A lot of that is, honestly, it's fraudulent.
Right.
Yeah, because if you think about it logistically, you need someone on the other side of the world to nominate an orphan.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you've nominated that orphan, and let's say his name's Fred. Fred sits in a classroom with 45 other kids. Fred's the only person sponsored. How does that work for him?
Yeah.
Fred's got his clothing and, all his supplies, and the kids next to him are struggling to have anything. Fred's not going to have a nice experience. And neither are those other kids. Whereas if we sponsor the entire orphanage, the entire place lifts together, and no one is differentiated from the other person, which is a lot better. There's no bullying, there's no marginalisation, there's no victimisation, and then we can look at the needs of the collective instead of the needs of the individual, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way we did it with this company, and so they started to strategically align with us, and corporately they would support us. With donations, but even in volunteering, if we're doing local homeless drives or whatever, their team would come with us to help distribute. And more, even on top of that, their founder has now made his way to our advisory board. So because again, he's built a successful business or several successful businesses. Yeah. So I want that think tank. That can help me. When I'm making decisions as the CEO or as a director, I want to have these ministers around me that are subject matter experts in their space, so they can give me the greatest advice so I can make the right decisions, and that's the way we sort of want to work it. So it's not just one dimension. I don't just want you to give me X amount a year to support this water well program. I'd like you to be involved and be across it so that you have a passion towards it. And then as we get experts in different areas, they can help sort of grow the projects into self-sustaining projects that have a lot more meaning and more sort of long-term benefits.
Right. And when it comes to precision integrity,
Yeah.
you're basically leading a band of ex-detectives.
Yes.
How does that feel?
It feels pretty amazing. Going back when we were in the police, the work was intense, right? So our caseloads were high, especially in the areas we worked. I mean, I was in Southwest Sydney all my career, so it was always the highest sort of amount of crime, highest amount of work. It was pretty full on, very dangerous.
Yeah.
And depending on what area of work you pick, so my trajectory was starting off general duties at Bankstown. At the time, it was the crime capital of the country, right? In several different categories, including violent crime, homicides, robberies, whatever you want to, any stat, we were there. And then from there, I went into a number of things, but I spent a lot of time and specialised in child protection and domestic violence.
Yeah.
And then from there, I started to really look outside just the police. So that I was working with frontline services and also lecturing at university, which I still do. I do the guest lecture for the Domestic and Family Violence Unit for the UWS, and started to help inform policy. So then I was part of the group that wrote the policy for New South Wales Police in domestic violence when the new laws came in. And so there was a lot of that. That became a big chapter of my life. Probably 10 years of my policing career was looking after kids and people who were fleeing domestic violence. And so you're in intense situations all the time. You're starting, as you grow in rank and in seniority, you're now leading teams in that area. So we're so involved in the work, but the camaraderie was also great, because when you spend 12 hours a shift with another cop in a car, you're either going to love him or hate him. But generally, police get along extremely well with each other because they're going through really serious stuff together, and your life is in each other's hands, right? Yeah. Every single time. And most emergency services are like that. The military is similar to this as well. And then now that we've left, we get to have the camaraderie without the intensity of like the depressive work, if that makes sense. We're getting the chance to use the skills that we were given and got to hone throughout our career in the police force, but also the camaraderie is so good between everyone in the team because everyone understands. We talk our own language, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so when the client comes in and they give us the job, it's always a collective team effort to respond. So what we'll do on a Monday morning, Anthony and I get the team together, and all the staff members are there. And so we go through every single job. It doesn't matter which officer is looking after what. We all go through all the jobs together so that it's sort of a circle conference. Everyone's going, hey, have we considered this? Have we considered that? So everyone has ownership of the entire caseload. So no one feels overwhelmed, and also they get to banter and we sort of discuss it, and it works really, really well. And it's like how we used to whiteboard investigations in the police. Yeah. Where we've hit a crossroad. What do we do here? Who do we think it is? And because our investigation is so diverse in precision, well, we could be reviewing a serious criminal matter for a criminal barrister going, hey, here are the holes in the case, or it actually wasn't him, we think it's this guy, and let's go pursue this guy and then present that to the police, for example. All the way to multi-million dollar corporate fraud where we're chasing the CFO where we believe he's been doing dodgies and we can uncover it. So there's so much diversity in the work that we do. Yeah. So it's really enjoyable coming to work, and I feel and I hope my staff feel the same way. I don't have issues with sick leave. I don't have issues with fights amongst the staff. It's a different environment.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's everything to them is like people that are there to, when people like to watch a murder mystery, or they like to do one of those board games where you have to try to work out what happened. We get to do this in real life. So it's quite enjoyable, the work, and the diversity keeps it fresh. So the morale of the team is usually really, really high, which makes it's a beautiful thing for me to watch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's very diverse, and I'm going to have a lot of questions, but I wanted to touch on the domestic violence bit first.
Yes.
A lot of reported domestic violence, the victims are women.
Yes.
But as we know, men are facing the same as well. But you don't see them coming forward.
Yes.
Would you say?
Yeah. Look, in my time, I probably interviewed more than 1,000 domestic violence perpetrators that were serious. If you came to me, you were in trouble, right? Yeah. If you came to my section, and they were all men. Now, the amount of male victims was also there, but they were usually perpetrated on by men too. So male were victims of other men. Yeah. Right? That's the majority of the statistics. Did I come across where women had abused the men? Yes, but they were a very small, tiny percentage. However, that's because for it to get to me, it means it's been reported to the police.
Correct.
Right? Very few men would report being assaulted by their female partner. Yeah. Right. Or their sister or their daughter. Where the other way around, you're more likely to get reporting, when the female is a victim. Yeah. And domestic violence, by and large, is underreported anyway. And if you add vulnerable communities, people from a linguistically diverse background, religious and cultural concerns, you have underreporting. Correct. So DV stats are very hard to gauge, and that's the problem. Because if the reports go up, does that mean more DV or does that mean more people are coming forward? Very hard for you to distinguish. What I can tell you is based on experience and who was I seeing all the time and the same faces coming back and women becoming victims of different men. So the first boyfriend was abusive, so was the second, then the husband was. So there becomes patterns and that you pick up on, and there's a lot of literature in this space. But for me, and what I focus on is I draw upon the psychology that I saw, and the sort of the how it plays out. So I don't think it's even at all in terms of male and female when it comes to. I do believe DV is gendered. Yeah. I do believe there's a strong. I believe there's many reasons for that, and I also find that there is a significant issue, especially with the origin point, which is usually the father. So even in my work with youth, the father was usually the estranged party. That sort of is the trigger for what's happening with the kids.
The father of the abuser?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and if we look at it in basic terms without going into the psychology, how a child sort of portrays their parents is key to how they live their life, right? Later on, as they develop relationships. So looking at, especially, I took a keen interest in sons with dads, and seeing the trajectory of where they go, whether they were victims or they were offenders, tracing that in, because when you're constantly dealing and interviewing victims and offenders, you do develop significant links, and you realize, there's always this pattern. This is usually where it leads. Yeah. And you have, for example, and they can be completely opposite, like where you have, for example, the alcoholic dad, and then you have two sons. One son ends up an alcoholic, one son never drinks. Yeah. Right. So it really depends how you take it. Yeah. And it's the same with violence. You may get one son who's becomes extremely violent, like their dad, where the other one is complete opposite. And will have significant internal issues in reconciling and trust issues and all these kind of things. And then with the girls, a lot of it becomes about the trust. Do they trust men? Yeah. And do they trust too much? Right. So for me, it became a lot about the epicenter. For me, was the father. So looking at, and that's whether he's present or non-present. Mm-hmm. So having an absent father also has an effect. Right. So I think what the insights we got into DV, especially for me personally, with the extensive experience I had, fortunately and unfortunately, definitely gave me that there's something there we need to work on dads. Yeah. It's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So father actually plays a very important role in the upbringing of children.
Yeah.
Whether that's going to be a son, daughter.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. What in your opinion, how do you encourage people to come forward for domestic violence? Because I know that a lot of people don't want to speak about it and they try to hide it.
Yep. I found the wonderful thing about the systems we have in Australia is we have a conduit that's relatively safe, which I believe is the health system.
Yeah.
And so what I would tell people that were very worried would be to go to their GP. And I'll tell you why. If a woman is in a very serious DV relationship where there's a strong coercive control, and I'm going to use male and female, just to make it easier. The husband, for example, will make it very difficult for her to go and tell other people about what's happening at home because he'll keep her isolated, right? So they won't be going to centres, she won't be going outside socialising with certain people because he won't trust that she might say something or someone may pick up, that she's being abused, right? But generally these men won't go with the wife into like her health checkup, her health checkup. So she goes and sees her doctor who would be female, especially when these kind of men, they'll make sure that their doctor's female, right? They can, for any kind of checkup, especially when it's prenatal and that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of DV when you're pregnant. That's one of the, what they call antagonizing factors, actually. And it's a very serious time for a woman that's in a DV relationship.
Why is
when
that?
she's actually pregnant, because, again, the woman now has more needs, for example, and the husband is already not a great guy, finds this extremely annoying and inconvenient.
Yeah.
Add the hormonal sort of journey that the pregnant mum is going through. But then all of a sudden also she's needing to go to all these appointments, and if things don't work out, he doesn't want any suspicion around him. So he needs her to keep her appointments. So, child protection services don't come knocking, hey, you haven't turned up, what's going on? And all these kind of things can happen. So he will also maybe he'll start abusing her on how she looks. Look how you look now, you're so big, you're this. It's really disgusting. You can still look, you should still be, I just remembering all the cases I did with pregnant women, and they're really, really horrific. And these men were just very, very, very poor excuses for men. And so what our team would do was, when she'd go to the examination room, that's where I'd have one of my team talking to her.
Yeah.
So she could give a proper account of what's happened, tell us, and not worry about anyone listening. And then that way, once we have the evidence, we can act. I distinctly remember a time when I walked in and took a doctor's lab coat and a stethoscope and posed as a doctor myself, because we're trying to arrest this guy. And I had my team, because I had half my team were police, the other half were child protection workers.
It doesn't just happen in the movies.
No, and it's really effective. This guy was a really nasty guy, and he'd done a lot of bad things, and we just needed to have the chance to get his wife alone, and so I had to pose as the doctor to keep him distracted, so that the women can do their alleged examinations of his wife. And we got the information that we needed. He'd done a lot of things. He'd hurt a lot of people, including his wife and other family members.
Wow.
And so, I was able to make sure that he couldn't go in, just in case he decided to walk into the nurse's office and do whatever. So I kept him busy with asking him questions on my magical clipboard. Yeah. So the healthcare system is a really good way. So I would encourage people that want to report DV but not directly go to the cops because they're scared or don't have the opportunity, that they go and have a doctor's visit create a reason why you need to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Go see the doctor. Usually your partner's not inside when you're having this kind of situation. And if you make it a very sort of private and invasive inquiry that you want to ask, then the doctor usually kick you out anyway and just leave the person in there by themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's the sort of hint we would use mainly to get that achieved, so you could sort of report it without having to report it, if that makes sense.
What's a telltale sign that someone's going through DV?
Oh, geez. Look, isolation is a huge one. Almost all male perpetrators or any sort of domestic violence perpetrator will try and isolate the victim. So you're not seeing them much at social events. Even they're not being allowed to see their family much. or their support network. They start to cut you off from your support network. And the problem is, was to tell when I ran programs with teenage girls, I'd be like, don't cut off your friend when you're like, oh, all she cares about is him now. She never turns up anymore. She doesn't come and see us. You don't know what's actually happening. And a lot of these young boys would do that. Yeah. I don't want you talking to her anymore. I don't want you to go to this dance. I don't want you going to whatever. Yeah. And they were saying, oh, he's just very jealous and protective. And there's also a very sinister angle to that too, where he doesn't want you to have support. He wants you to completely rely on him, right? And that isolation tactic is a key tactic in DV abusers. The other thing will be a significant change probably in personality. Yeah. You'll see a shift in how, if they were really outward and open and bubbly, and then they become quite sullen and quiet, that can be a telltale. But again, there's just so much contextually that you'd need to know, and you can't really paint everyone with the same brush. Yeah. But above and beyond, isolation is usually the greatest way to find out.
Yeah. So running a private investigating firm, what do you reckon is the biggest challenge for victims to come to you and say, I need help?
A lot of it, I suppose, is ignorance of the sector and what investigators can do. I mean, we have tried as much as we can, very hard, to chop the name private in front of investigators. Okay. So we call ourselves investigators. We don't say we're private investigators. I call it an investigations firm, not a PI agency, because private investigators notoriously have this stigma of being the guys with the telephoto lens following cheating spouses, right? Yeah. That's pretty much what they do. It's what a PI does. Now, even though, yes, that is part of the funnel in terms of what comes your way in inquiries, for us especially, because we are former detectives, we are investigators for anyone, not private. Right, we investigate, as I said, for corporates. Yeah. I do much more corporate investigations and legal investigations than private ones, significantly more. You're more likely to go to a workplace investigation for bullying, harassment, or an injury, right, than you are trying to find someone who possibly is, doing the sneaky on their partner. Mm-hmm. That's with my firm anyway, right? So what we've found difficult, and it's become my major marketing challenge, is educating the consumer on what I can deliver for them. That's become a real problem for us. Yeah. Because I'm competing with people that have done a Certificate 3 in investigative services online. So really we should be miles ahead. Yeah. Right? Yet if I do little sort of gimmicks about, is your missus cheating, or what's he doing? Did you know that? These guys can use this and create a fake profile, and they're going to brothels, or they're online dating, or whatever the hell they're doing. If I run campaigns like that, I'll get a lot more attention. Yeah. Right? Because that to them makes sense with what investigating is. Where I found I need to directly market to law firms and different sort of areas that are relevant, liquidators, people in the financial sector, forensic accountants, that kind of stuff, because that's my cohort. Yeah. Because we're mainly part of a forensic evidence gathering system. Okay. We're part of that team. Yeah. So it's a real challenge.
Can you give us a bit of an example? What do you do for liquidation firms, liquidators?
So liquidators mainly, the first thing they need from us is, hey, can you find the guy, right? Because these people go missing. Yes. And they owe a lot of money. They go, and if they don't go missing, you know what goes missing? The asset. Yeah. Right. Like I'll give you an example. We had one where the liquidator contacts us. He goes, hey, we're liquidating this company. They've got nothing left. They've got this asset that's worth, say, $1 million. We can't find it, but it's a very unique type of machinery. Yeah. And they gave a budget of a couple of $100, for example, and I laughed. And he goes, "I know, I'm dying." I go, "So this client stands to gain $1 million worth of machinery, but is thinking a couple of $100 we might find it. Look, where do you think this? How do you think this plays out?" Yeah. And it showed us the lack of education in that space. So what I didn't have the opportunity. There was so many competing interests at the time, but I reconnected with that liquidator down the track, and we do a lot of work with him now. Yeah. And because their client didn't engage us because we were too much money to spend on trying to find this thing. Yeah. So he asked me to walk him through it. What would we have done? So this equipment was very unique. Wherefore it was in sort of, how can I explain it without giving away too much? I don't care, I'll give away. They didn't use us anyway, but that ship has sailed. But basically, think rubber, all right? In the rubber manufacturing process, there's a certain type of equipment that you need, right, to do this. It's very expensive, it's very large. So I said to him, okay, this equipment, wouldn't it need maintenance? He said, yeah. How many people you think in this state do that job?
Yeah.
He goes, I don't know. Do you think it'd be in the thousands? He goes, no. I go, neither do I. So what I would do is narrow it down to go to who are the people that manufacture is one thing, the item, because there might be service history, right? But let me find the guys that repair it, because that'll be even smaller. There's such a niche kind of piece of machinery.
Yes.
I could probably find 12 in Australia.
Wow.
And I said, that's who I go for. And then we do good old-fashioned police work. Knock on doors and ask questions.
Yeah.
That's what we would do. And I go, you probably would have spent a few $1,000s, but you would have got yourself $1 million worth of machinery.
So reverse engineering.
Yeah, exactly right. And he goes, yeah, that would have been a good move. He goes, but the guy would, that's the problem, again, because it's an education process to the client.
Yeah.
Now, all I wanted was the chance to speak to the client, to walk him through that process, but no. They weren't amenable to that. And that's why we decided in our business to introduce mandatory consults.
What's that?
So if you're going to see, for example, your specialist, they'll charge you a consult fee.
Yeah.
Now, if you spend 6 minutes with that specialist or 15 minutes or whatever it is, you're paying that fee. And if you cancel, you're still paying that fee.
Yeah.
Right? And law firms will do that kind of thing as well, barristers, whatever. There's all different sort of professions that will have this kind of mode. Yeah. And I went, that's what we're going to do. Yeah. Because, number one, if you can't afford my consult, you can't afford our services. Mm-hmm. Number two, it tells me that you're serious. Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm charging a one-off consult fee to come and sit with us, but it gives me the chance to get all the information from you, and I can tell you exactly what we could do. So then you walk away with a lot of knowledge. Yeah. Right, which you've paid for your time. Yeah. So the investigator that sat with you has also been paid for. No one loses in that arrangement. Whereas before, you're just giving free legal advice to everybody, right? Because you're cheaper than a lawyer, right? And we know the law very, very well, right? So that sort of helped shape the modelling of how we did the intake for business, because we realised we have to add an education sort of a factor into this, because people don't really understand what investigators can do. And my most common inquiry over the phone is, so I never called an investigator before, don't really know what you guys do. Can you explain? How about you tell me your problem, and then I'll explain to you all the options, because we could do a million things.
Correct.
And so that's sort of key for us in how one of the biggest business challenges I have in the investigation space is educating the consumer.
I reckon that's one of the biggest challenges that most of the business have as well, especially if they're doing plethora of different things.
Yeah.
How do you condense everything into 15 seconds, 30 seconds?
Exactly.
When people ask you, what do you do?
Exactly right.
So you do a lot of work for corporates as well. And I know that you can find out a lot about people, a lot of backgrounds.
Yes.
We do have clients from overseas as well, multi-billion-dollar clients, even billionaires that we need to do due diligence on.
Yes.
When corporate clients come to you and they do they ask you to do a due diligence on a person, what do you normally look for?
Good question. So it depends what they want. I ask them, what's your objective?
Yeah.
So some people are just looking to see if the person is not lying to them. They just want to affirm that the facts presented about them are correct.
Correct.
Right? So it could be like a recruitment onboarding situation. It's a C-level sort of position. So they're going to be handling a lot of money in terms of their budget of the company.
Yeah.
Or they're going to be privy to really confidential and damaging info if it got out, for example, to competitors.
Yeah.
So they need to know who they're dealing with when they're recruiting this person. So there's that type of inquiry. Well, I'll look into, okay, show me their resume, show me what they're saying, and let me see if this holds true. The other side of it could be, does this person have the financial ability to inject those funds for this investment?
Yeah.
Or give me leverage. We're about to go to war with this guy or this other company, and either them or their legal reps or their barristers will say, we need leverage.
Okay.
Go find what you can.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of that in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's proved to have very, very strong impact because, I'll give you one example. There was a very significant Supreme Court matter, and there's a witness list. And so the barrister was like getting towards the end of this, and it was like, we're running out of options. Luckily, the barrister has met us, and he knows kind of what we do. So he told his instructing solicitor, contact Precision and see if they can do something. And he's like, well, what could they do? He goes, you know what? Put them on a teleconference. I'll put all of us on there. So I jump on the teleconference with the barrister and with this lawyer who's never met us before. Mm-hmm. They give us a briefing on what the situation is in court, and basically it's all about the credibility of those giving testimony. Now they knew this group are lying, the other side. They're giving false testimony, but we need to be able to prove this, or at least show something in their character that proves they're not sincere, genuine people. And so we ended up taking the witness list, and we said, let us do some preliminary inquiries on these guys, and let's see what we find.
Yeah.
And very quickly, one of the people involved started to look really, really suspicious in their wheelings and dealings over time. So we basically said, let us do a deep probe into this guy. We think we'll find something. So they all agreed. An agreement was made, and actually Anthony did it. My business partner ended up taking that one because it was very involved, and Anthony's the most senior investigator in the team. And he came back with saying this person has, in multiple jurisdictions, been found guilty of different offences. Now, you can't find this normally, right?
You can't just do a Google
search. You can't just do a search, but even legally, if you want to subpoena records and stuff, you have to know where to look. You can't just do a blanket subpoena. I want to subpoena everything.
Yeah.
Judge won't give you that. You need to be focused when you're asking for a subpoena, right? So you can't do a scattergun approach. But with the investigators, we're looking for intel purposes, trying to find things out. We're not here to produce this forensically yet. We're looking to see where should we look. So when we scoped everything out, we're like, aha, this is very serious. It actually has another judge saying in proceedings, this person is insincere, doesn't give genuine testimony. Now that's gold.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if the others were either complicit to this and said nothing, or they don't know about it. Yeah. Either way, it's a great thing to ask someone in the box, right? Anyway, it ended up, long story short, without me giving too much detail, it ended up being the exact the weapon that they needed. Yeah. And we have now received multiple jobs from that firm because of what happened. So it's really important. Like sometimes think, we're going to court. He gave a statement. Yeah, who is he? Who is this guy? Why is his statement so amazing? And how do you know this person is of good character or is being truthful? Because in the end, it's just someone saying something and signing it. Doesn't mean it's the truth, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we peel back and look into what are the facts. And in court settings, you're looking at a couple of things. In criminal, you're looking at reasonable doubt, right? In civil, it's only on the balance of probabilities. So you're talking a 50-50 shot here. Could they be? Not beyond reasonable doubt. Yeah. I'll find you some doubt. Yeah.
How do you find out how much someone owns or what someone owns?
Yeah, it's
asking for a friend.
Yeah, good question. We get a lot of that because we're also licensed mercantile agents or debt collectors. Yeah. So we do a lot of credit history work and trying to see what the value is. But for family law court matters especially, or in debt collection cases, you want to know the other party have enough money to pay you back anyway.
Correct.
So I could owe you $2 million, but if I own nothing, you're not going to get nothing from me, right? So there needs to be a bit of a feasibility assessment first. So yes, we do a lot of that. Now, there are the normal sort of channels where you've got, if they're in Australia or New South Wales or whatever they are, there's ASIC searches and different things you can do where business registers are held, and you can have who owns the asset that's registered, right? In different areas, whether it's a vehicle or property or whatever it is, or there's significant loans and mortgages, but people that are trying to evade aren't going to put it in their name.
Yep.
So then I'm looking at the circles of influence that this person has around him. Usually your go-to is the wife, the son, whatever. Yep. Could be a brother, but then it could be a friend, could be someone overseas. So you're looking in all these different areas. What we do notoriously is look for people like us in other countries and develop a network of relationships with them. So in certain places around the world, I look for people that have the exact business model that I have.
Yep.
I want them to be ex-detectives, all right? Ex-specialist police, because not just will they have the skill set, they'll have the connections.
Yeah.
And especially overseas, sometimes in many countries, just because you're retired doesn't mean that you no longer have influence in that department. In Australia, it's a bit different. You're a retired police officer, that's it. You don't have cops working for you.
Yeah.
Overseas, doesn't mean anything, right? In certain countries, they're gold, and it's legal for them to do that. So beautiful. It's their jurisdiction. They're not committing any offences, so I'm not. That's the power we've got. And they won't speak to your Cert 3 investigator online. You know, again, because cops speak their own way. They do understand. Mm-hmm. So they look us up like we look them up.
Yep.
So once they know we're genuine former, police investigators, they'll be like, okay, it's good for them to have a relationship with us too, because they might have the same needs, where someone from their country has absconded to Australia and tried to do shifties. We'll find him.
Yeah.
So finding people in Australia is, going to be a lot easier for me than it will be for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you know more about me than anyone else already, than I know about myself already. I'm going to ask you one question that I ask every guest in this podcast.
Yeah.
What is the fuck it moment that you had that propelled you personally and professionally?
Well, I think I told you and I told Anthony, my whole life is fuck it moments. But
Pick one.
The one I can think of that's probably the most poignant, it's probably when, so I was headhunted for a job, and that's what I left the police for.
Yep.
Very senior role. So I took that job, and a very long story short, that company did not continue, and so the owners shut it down. And I was the CEO at the time, so myself and everyone under me lost their job. Right? It was not expected. It was a massive shock. And for the first time in my life, I was coming home unemployed.
Wow.
After I've never been unemployed in my adult life. So I was coming home to a mortgage and 3 kids. And it was a Sunday. Right? I got told on a Sunday morning the news. And I didn't sleep for 7 days trying to come up with what the hell do I do here.
Yeah.
And my fuck it moment was, I'll never work for anyone again. I'm going to start my own company, because I never want to be at the whim of someone above me to say, sorry, we're letting you go.
Yeah.
Right? I never want to experience it. That was, to me, the last time I'll have experienced that in my life. So my fuck it moment was jumping online and creating my first ABN without knowing what the hell I'm going to do.
And what did you do then?
I put it as a consultant. That company still exists, Danny Mikati Consulting. And I basically then reached out to people that were close to me that I had helped over the years. And they, and my wife was amazingly supportive. My wife was the one that pushed me. She goes, you've always wanted to work for yourself. Maybe this is God's way of showing you it's time to do it.
Yeah.
Where other probably women would have cried and thought, what the hell do we do? We're like, I'm the sole breadwinner for the family. What happens now?
Yeah.
So she was amazing. And people in my life that I had the benefit of helping throughout the year, they just said, just you sit aside, let us do this. And they wrote my resume, and they helped me sort of to work out what kind of services I could consult in, because I'd done so many different things. And I started consulting immediately in child protection matters. And that's what led me to my investigations. Yeah. So I started doing consulting for, that led to investigations for the Ombudsman and Office of Children's Guardian in foster care and child protection related matters. So that's what triggered my investigations path. Yeah.
There seems to be a common denominator here that everyone who bounced back had a very, very strong support from their spouse.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
That's amazing. Thanks very much, Danny. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
That was good.
Very, very good having you.
Thank you, brother.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot more other stories, so this is not going to be the last one. The last time you're going to be here.
My pleasure.
Do you think that was a great podcast? We'd love to hear questions and thoughts from you guys. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to us from wherever you get your podcast.